Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Star Trek edition of the Secret Origins of Mint Condition. We are continuing our 60th anniversary celebration of Star Trek, and we are finally doing it for all of you who have followed the podcast. We did 1, 3, and 4, and today is the day where we finally complete the Genesis saga, where we talk about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Kahn. And for this episode, we were all on the bridge because we have a huge crew gathered. So joining me on the bridge is Joe.
Thank you, James. Hey, folks, how you doing?
And Josh.
I'm allergic to Red Knox.
And Jack.
Live long and prosper.
And John.
Glad to be aboard.
And making his first appearance on a Star Trek edition, Keith Bethon is with us.
So human.
This is one of these movies, obviously, that's been talked about. It's considered the best movie by most Star Trek fans. It's considered a good movie just by regular people who are not Star Trek fans. So I'm not sure where this conversation will go, but most of our conversations, we'll see where it takes us. But I always like to start with if you remember when you first saw this and your thoughts and what you're thinking now. Joe, since you are our senior ranking officer, I always like to go to you first since you were there when this first premiered. You were in line, hopefully. So what is your recollection of Star Trek II when it first came out?
Well, 1982, right? Let's see, when was it exactly? June 4th, 1982 release date. So I was probably, I think I saw it at the Cross Bay Theater in Ozone Park, if I'm not mistaken. We kind of knew, we Star Trek fans, we kind of knew that Spock was going to die at the end of the film. Don't ask me how we knew that. It's before the internet. But there were conventions. There were fan magazines. So that wasn't the big... It didn't hit us that hard because I knew it. I knew it was going to happen, but I still enjoyed the film, even though what the big final sequence was going to be when the cast member was dying. And like I said to you, James, yesterday when we were speaking about this, when I saw this movie, and this is well before the Hunt for Red October, this to me was a submarine film. This was, that's exactly what it was, and I like those type of films. I like thrillers like that. So I was very, very pleased. And, I don't want to open a can of worms here, Josh, but, this is following Star Trek: The Motion Picture. It's a better film. So I was very pleased because of that. Yeah, that's my initial recollection. Oh, and Kirstie Alley. This is her, we know nobody knew who she was. This is her introduction to all of America, or wherever these films went. So those are my initial reactions.
And just to take the temperature, where does Star Trek II rank in your, I guess, movie ranking?
Well, as you know, Voyage Home is number 1. First Contact is number 2. This would be number 3.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, as a spoiler, I guess, to everyone else, if you have your rankings, if you know where they are, just to take the temperature. Jack, since you're the next senior officer, just curious.
Wow.
Falling out here.
Very flattering, yeah. It's going to get dicey when it gets to you guys. But anyway, I think I might have mentioned on a past podcast, this one, apart from the movie itself, is very special to me because it was, I think, one of the few times that my dad actually took me and my brother to the movies. And it was, I imagine, at the insistence of my mother, we had gone to a local theater and we arrived a few minutes late. And so we were a little confused when Spock comes in and, Captain Kirk says, Mr. Spock, I thought you were dead. And I mean, so our perspective is like, what's going on here? I don't understand. The Kobayashi Maru opening. And so even apart from the quality of the movie, it's just from an emotional standpoint, it was one of these kind of things that, I try to do now with my kids is you have these things that these touchstones that you share that you can always remember and you can always call back to. And so it in many ways, this to me is just a very special movie.
How old were you, Jack, when you saw it?
Good question. It came out in 82. I was 11.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I was much older than that.
I guess that's why we're doing seniority.
I was well past drinking age.
In condition, you were the first 30-year-old I'd ever met.
Oh my God! You know what? Again, I now, and that will be the legend that I have. It's like, oh my God, he is 30.
The way you said it, oh my God.
So, Jack, I'm going to ask you, where does it fall in your Star Trek movie ranking?
Sure. For me, I mean, I like The Voyage Home. I like The Undiscovered Country. Even extending to the next gen movies, I like First Contact. But this one, to me, is the movie that does everything right. And I think we'll just kind of get into further discussions as to why I think that is.
So it's top one, number one
top
pick?
one.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
And also when they had started to air it on ABC, they would have the extended edition, which again, you was not always able to get those added additional scenes, and so I mean, it almost lived in myth in that way, because the movie I saw in the theater was not the same movie that I saw at home. It had like more scenes in it, and it's like, my gosh, not only did I miss the beginning, I missed other things. How'd that happen? So yeah.
All right. Well, now it's down to our normal ranking officers. Now the admirals have given their their takes on it. So
no, we're Commodores.
Exactly.
The Commodores have given. So maybe Admiral Whittemore, do you want to give us your...
I guess, does that make me the rear admiral? Oh, that's too easy a joke. I'm sorry.
Lord.
I apologize to myself for how cheesy that joke
Look at the time. I got to go, guys.
Holy crap.
I know one friend is going to be laughing their ass off at that one. So this is I'll jump right in with my ranking of the movie.
Okay.
This is my rankings of the movie, 6, 4, 2. First Contact Generations is sort of where I generally go. There's a little bit of equal balance. Like 3, I feel like is almost an extension of 2, but not as good as 4. Like that type of thing. But that is high praise, because I really love Star Trek 4. That's the first Star Trek movie I ever watched. And this movie I watched, the first movie I ever saw in theaters, I believe, was Star Trek 6. Star Trek 4 is the first Star Trek film I ever saw. And quickly following up on that is where Star Trek 2 went down to the drugstore for where they were renting them, back then. Speaking of Hunt for Red October, that is, as we many times, where they had the giant inflatable submarine above the VHS section.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Because it's all around that same time when the rentals were available. And took out Star Trek 2, and it had the very 80s style artwork VHS cover. Like it was that like 80s style, like it was like next to like Zardoz and other things. Like it just had that same vibe. So I thought like, oh, this is gonna be like a weird sci-fi movie. And little did I know, I'd be right. It had a very different vibe than Star Trek 4, had a very different vibe than the original series, which I'd already started watching by then. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it also, as a kid, it had moments where it definitely scared the hell out of me and creeped the hell out of me, because it begins with the earworms, as I call them, like going in. That freaks you out when you're a little kid, because that was very graphic, and there was, like as it's going to Chekhov's ear, it was like, hey, no, that's gross. So you're sort of freaking out at that while watching. Oh, this isn't going to be like an easy ride. Like they're going intense for this movie. So I always appreciated that aspect of it. But I can't wait to talk about like my take. I think a lot will overlap with what you guys, and I have some of my own takeaways from it that I really in later life have come to appreciate from the movie.
Yeah, it's been, I didn't get a chance to finish fully rewatching it, but I rewatched most of it for this, and I will say, but it really holds up as a movie. But I guess we can talk about that too as we dive into our conversation. Keith, you remember when you first saw it and where it ranks in your Star Trek?
Well, if you've seen Star Trek 2, I just want to say that you do not want to be an admiral, because if it's taught us anything, it's that you got to be a captain, otherwise get out of the game. I kind of wonder, like, I mean, I was only 2 when this movie came out, so I kind of wonder if my ranking would be different if I'd seen this in the theaters, because it's so different from the motion picture, and it's such like a tonal change, and like it looks different, it feels different. I think if I saw it in the theaters, this might be my number 1, because this is kind of like a package deal with the third movie, obviously, and that's where the movies start to feel like they're hitting their stride, at least for me. But I saw Star Trek 4 in theaters, and that was a crazy year. I mean, that was like Transformers. There's so many good movies that year, but I think Star Trek 4 is my favorite, and then I really like 6 also, just because there's so much action, and like you got a Klingon villain quoting Shakespeare. I mean, like it doesn't get any better than that, really. So, but 2's, if you saw it in the theater, I'm guessing 2 might be one of your favorites for sure.
So does that mean like 2 is like what, 3 for you? Just 4? So it's 4, 6, and 2. I'm sorry, just to get your ranking.
For me, I'd say probably like 4, 6, and 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 6 is great too. I mean, we will get to 6 eventually.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
also, it's really hard between 2 and 6 in my rankings is really hard to say where they go with each other. But Josh, do you remember when you saw 2 and where you put it in your Star Trek movie ranking?
I do not remember at all. I have no memory of. I have no memory of seeing this for the first time.
Were you
But
born when this movie came out, Josh?
I
No.
I was not. I was not. I was a couple of years too late. But like you guys, it, it is definitely in my top 3. One of the things about it that I'm realizing is that a lot of you said your top 3 were some combination of 2, 4, and 6. All of them written or co-written by Nicholas Meyer,
Good point. Mm-hmm.
which I do not think is a coincidence, because one of the reasons I think that this movie works as well as it is because it is the first Star Trek movie that brings this kind of sense of Joe, I'm going to use your favorite word, verisimilitude,
There you go.
where
Mm-hmm.
where it feels really grounded and real in a way that up until then, you had the motion picture, you had the 3 seasons of the original series, you had the 2 seasons or the season and a half of the animated series, but up until then, no Star Trek had that sense of grounded reality that this movie had, and it's not at the expense of the Star Trekkiness of it, because it's also a great Star Trek. And I was thinking about this morning. It may be, I can't think of a movie before this that was like a real theatrical film that was in direct continuity with an episode of a TV show.
That's interesting.
I think Kahn might be jamming Josh's transmission, by the way.
Somebody is.
I think Kahn might be jamming the transmission. Are you near the Genesis planet, Josh?
He's in the Mutaran.
Oh no, we've lost into the nebula.
Kahn's got him.
And he's never letting go.
Well,
Yes, those are my thoughts.
That's food for thought, Josh, especially the whole idea of a sequel to a TV episode. That's wow.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that too. When you were growing up, it's like I don't know if a movie has since I couldn't remember any like movies that have taken like a single episode of a television show or a single villain and then carried them over into the movie.
There has to be somewhere. See, if we were doing a live radio show right now, we'd be like, callers, call in with your top movies that have been based on an episode from. Yeah, I don't know.
There is one from summer 1966, but it's all I mean, the Batman '66 movie had the.
Yeah, but that was the same production as the show. Like, I mean, like a whole separate style and team, years removed. Like, it's it's a movie that directly invokes as a direct sequel to an episode of a TV show. I don't know that that's ever happened before. And the thing that's so genius about it is that, like, you would think that, well, then that must mean that this movie is really only for Star Trek fans. But that's so far from the truth. And actually, what's amazing is that I also think that this is the first Star Trek movie. You sort of have this with the motion picture, but there's an asterisk there. But this is the first Star Trek movie that, at least for the original series moving forward, is saying, here are these characters changing and grappling with the change. The whole movie is about grappling with the changing ground, and you lose arguably the most beloved character in the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about this when we did Star Trek 3, and John, you I think were one of the pointing this out. Like it's a real grapple with like Kirk's age,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something we also talked about in Generations too. Is it goes back to like the the age thing and getting older and stuff. And this is like, I guess it's the first like sort of domino where we're talking about like characters actually getting older, which is not something you, I guess, really get to see with other movie franchises or things like this, where they like it's openly like
Acknowledge it.
Yeah, it's
acknowledge
usually,
it that they're
usually
getting
a
old.
coming of age film,
Top
right?
of my note list for today. Like, and it's funny because I think if we had done this episode maybe even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I would have had a very different priority list of like what I would talk about, especially, you know, again, the amazing submarine battle at this that culminates in this movie, the notion of Genesis. There's so much to dig into in this movie. But for me at this moment, it's not that they deal with age, they deal with aging in this
Mhm.
movie in a way that was completely new to me as a little kid, because as a little kid I'm familiar, like, oh, you see people who are more aged than you, they look older, whatever, like that's something you encounter in the everyday world. When you're a kid, the notion of aging is completely out, like it's not something you experience, it's not something that you, or that is really talked to you about. And it was a real mystery to me to watch, well, why was Captain Kirk so sad in the beginning of this movie? That was a real mystery to younger version of me. I didn't understand that. The movie, coming to its conclusion, brought me there as much as I think a little kid could be brought. And that always stayed with me. It was the idea of, oh, things change. And you can at one moment be Captain Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise in the 1960s show. And the next moment, you're the same person, but you're not. And you're not on the ship, but you wish you were. And you miss it terribly, the sense of loss, a sense of things. And then, of course, it starts off with he's missing his previous life, and the movie ends with him missing one of his closest friend. But then at the same time, now what strikes me is that scene in the Genesis cave in phase 2, when he's with Carol Marcus, with Dr. Marcus. And she asks him, you know, for the second time, how do you feel?
What are you feeling,
And he
right?
says, I feel young.
Second time, yeah.
What does she? Well, she actually correct that. She says, I feel young. You know, she's talking about how this made her feel young. And Kirk ends up not in that scene, but later after Spock's death, but when they're looking at the new planet formed, and he says with almost with literal like glint in his eye, I feel young. She had sort of brought him along this journey from feeling a bit sorry for himself, which I can totally relate to, being about the same age that he was in that movie.
Well, he's got the reading glasses. That's when you feel bad,
Right?
John.
Oh man, that happened to me like clockwork. And my doctor's like, well, you need reading glasses or contact lenses. Now I have contact lenses that compensate for it. And because Everett X5 doesn't work for me. It's mind-boggling. Like, and I'm like, but I'm thinking, no, Captain Kirk was so old at that point. He's so old. I'm not. Oh no. Oh, what happened? How did this happen? And I'll admit to everybody here and everybody listening, I'm very disappointed in myself. I've not yet captained a starship. And I'm the same age that Captain Kirk was. And I feel like I should have accomplished that by now. Why haven't I captained a starship? Why aren't there starships? No, but this was if Generations was a meditation on death for its glories and foibles of that movie, this movie is so much a meditation on time, the process of aging, and figuring out where you fit in the universe. And Kirk has to find that. Spock finds it in a much more tragic but also profound way. He finds himself throughout this movie, and then has to find himself as he comes back in the next movies. Spoiler alert. So yeah, I think that is a great contribution to Star Trek, because it gives us something that is more than just Captain Kirk trying to recapture his old glory, because you can't revisit the same show again. Every time we see a show that they literally try to bring the same characters back doing the same thing, you're like, oh, it's kind of sad. They're trying to just be who they were. This was like, hey, you can't be that anymore. You're not that anymore. Not only you're an admiral, but you're not the same person you were. But here's what you can discover, and here's new life. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, and John, to further that, the whole idea of Genesis is in juxtaposition to what you just said. So it just thematically works that way too. Yeah.
The movies is my real introduction to the original series crew. I wouldn't watch the entire TOS until much, much later after seeing this. And now, like after our long discussions about Star Trek One, to Shatner's credit, he really does carry a good through line for the Kirk character, at least through 1 through 4. He is the same character. Like there is consistencies. Like Star Trek: The Motion Picture, he's kind of dour too, and this movie is picking up off of that. And you know, 3, I think he's still meditating on aging, but also he's grief stricken. And then 4 is like when you finally get the upswing from that character. I mean, I guess when they steal the Enterprise in 3 is when he finally sort of really gets out of his like funk that we've seen him in since the movie saga began, and that just continues on and through 4. But all credit to Shatner to having like a good through line and really knowing. Maybe he was going through the same things while he was shooting this. Who knows? Like with his career and everything, if he was just feeling like it was lining up with the character as well.
He was doing
He's
TJ
a good
Hooker,
actor, but he's not that good. I think you're onto something there. Yeah.
Well, he goes to what we were just talking about, the Ticonderoga bridge, the reconstruction of the bridge, and he does talks there now. So he's like fully embraced being Kirk at this point, or at least his role in it. So
it's quite the rebirth from his previous thoughts on the matter.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to John's point, I mean, when you sit down, I was like thinking, even from The Wrath of Khan, I think he's like the only surviving major character. I mean, like Carol Marcus had died, and David had died much earlier than even some of the original cast. And so, to your point about where he is now in his life, in his career, I mean, he has ostensibly outlived all of these people with whom he created this cultural idea in a way that no one can truly ever understand what that's like to have been there when this was being created and everything else. I mean, we have recounts, we have biographies and tell-alls and all of that, but I mean, he's the only one who has true firsthand knowledge of it at this point, and that is, I think, keeping with the theme of aging, as you pointed out, John.
Well, we still got George Takei and Walter Koenig. Like, let's not forget about that.
That's true.
But you're right. Of the core 3, it's wild to think. I mean, he's coming up on a century.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he's coming up on a century, and just like Leonard Nimoy went through a journey where around this point, Wrath of Khan, he was ready to sort of hang up Star Trek. It was like that, closed the door on that chapter of his life. It was done. There was a lot of talk this would be Spock's permanent death, and that, well, then when they gave him the directing reins of Star Trek 3, that sort of, enticed him back, or at least convinced him that he didn't have to follow another path. But Shatner went the same way. Like they all thought they were done with this. And the beautiful thing about Star Trek has been seeing virtually every actor realize that it wasn't just a role that you have to put behind you, and that it sucks to be identified in pop culture as this. That being part of this actually means something greater for even the actor.
Your bank account.
And not bank account, obviously, but not just a limitation on acting and identity. That was really something I think the actors came to embrace, especially in their later years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing about it too is that I think you talk about aging and the process of aging and how your perspective changes. I think that when you start to get beyond middle age, you have a better appreciation for what it means that you are associated with something. You have done work that has really given you a shot at a real kind of an immortality that very few people actually get. And I think that you kind of soften to the idea that, like, actually, that is something very precious and special, and I'm incredibly lucky. And I think that you look at those aspects of it in a way that, maybe when you're in the middle of your career and you're still trying to work and preserve some sense that the sky's the limit still, you want to escape the shadow of that one role, that one job. And I think, when you get a little older, it's like, no, you know what? Like, this is something really special. and I'm lucky that I got it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean he's. I mean, I know there two other people have played Kirk at this point, but he's still Kirk. He defines the role. Everyone else has done, I think, a good job. I mean, I think Chris Pine did the best job. The person on Strange New Worlds, I think, is still working to grow into a Kirk, but Shatner is Kirk. Probably will always be the defining aspect of that character going forward. So. Same thing. I think of everybody of the original crew. Like, you know, there's now everyone's eventually going to be replayed by somebody at some point, but everybody's who originally inhabited those roles defined it. So, Josh, I'm curious because I know we only have a little short time with you. Of like looking back on Wrath of Khan as a whole, what would you say is like your biggest highlight or like takeaway that, you know, obviously the aging aspect is a big theme of it, but what would you say other than that is something that you would like highlight?
Well, something that always certainly strikes me now, I don't know that I was aware of it when I was younger, but we've spoken many times and in many places that, like, I think that the future stewards of the Star Trek franchise looked at this movie and wisely wanted to draw inspiration from it, but they always drew the wrong lessons. So the idea that you need some personified villain who ideally has some sort of a personal vendetta against your lead is like the secret formula, and that's exactly the wrong thing, because, you know, again, as John was saying, all of that is in service of these really challenging and uncomfortable, not necessarily uncomfortable, but like challenging, heady themes. And Khan's whole thing is that he's unwilling to change. He's in stasis. He is living in the past. He wants revenge on this man for something that happened, 15 years ago, and that completely defines him and is ultimately what ends up destroying him. Kirk, on the other hand, he will grow along with life's challenges, even though it's not easy and it is a struggle for him. So the idea that you would see a movie about that, and your lesson would be, it's like, okay, so we need a supervillain who's hell-bent on revenge. Check. What else we got? And the other side of that for me now is like watching it. This is such a cheaply made movie. They had such little money. I think out of all of the Star Trek movies, I think the budget for this one was the smallest.
You're correct. I checked this before. So it is per dollar the highest grossing Star Trek movie. So other movies have made more money, but they also had higher budgets. And so this was,
right.
The budget was only $12 million.
Wow.
It made 97, so it essentially made 8 times its money back. The highest grossing Star Trek movie was J.J. Abrams' Into Darkness. It netted 467 million, but at a budget of 190 million, it basically just made almost 2.5 times the money back. So right. The Wrath of Khan, for $12 million, it was just a blockbuster movie.
Right. So they made it on a shoestring, and what maybe the lesson that future producers of Star Trek films should be taking from this is maybe we should make it with some limitations, not spend $200 million on a movie. Like, maybe there's some virtue in having restrictions and limiting yourself and seeing what comes out of that. Like, maybe you actually have to pay more attention to the interactions between the characters in those rooms with 4 walls, and maybe you have to think a little bit harder about the themes, and maybe you have to get creative. Like I know that this wasn't intentional. It's very often highlighted that the protagonist and the antagonist in this movie are never in the same room together. I don't think they ever actually. I don't think the actors were ever on set. Ricardo Montalban and William Shatner at the same time. And the other genius thing is by having the other setting be a Federation starship, you're able to shoot like 90% of the movie on the same set. It's really, really smart.
So Josh is advocating for less is more, intelligent design, good dialogue, and less CGI. So apparently he never wants to work in Hollywood again, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I know, it's my problem. Yeah.
No, but you know, I tend to agree with him. So one of the shows that has been kind of recognized as Pluribus, and it has a very modest. I mean, it costs a lot to make the show, but that's only because they recreated a whole neighborhood for it to happen. But as far as what the show actually presents, virtually no CGI. It's all very practical, and most of the tension is basically from people discussing and engaging with each other, and it has struck a chord, I think, with viewers, particularly science fiction viewers, in what it is you can actually say without having to rely overly much on these exorbitant budgets and all of these visual effects that just doesn't give you much in the end. Excuse me, I have a crazy dog I have to attend to.
It's a product a little bit of, as we've discussed, the motion pictures reception. Like the studio got a little spooked and they cut the budget, but it turned out great things. I mean, the invention, like they had the necessity of needing to make a movie and needed to do it for less money, and they did it. But go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, like the increasing the size of the spectacle, and like how can we wow them? Can we have more and bigger? We live in a time now where you can show anything on the screen, and you can basically look almost anywhere, and it's so omnipresent. It's not that much of a treat to see a movie about starships shooting at each other. So there's a sense of diminishing returns here, where it's like, okay, it's no longer novelty just to show that. So when it all looks like something you can see in basically any movie, it's not special. And that's one of my issues about newer Star Trek incarnations, and to a degree, it's not Star Trek's fault, or not the fault of the producers or other people who were making it. But it's sort of like Star Trek now looks kind of interchangeable with lots of other sci-fi. And it's like, is that inevitable because there's so much more sci-fi, or is it because they've lost something that made Star Trek unique? I'm not sure.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that in our Triples episode, and then we obviously talked about that in our Star Trek 9 episode. I mean, modern Trek looks like JJ's Trek. Like, as soon as JJ had the look of 2009, that's what Discovery started that, and then obviously they had that. So when they went into doing Strange New Worlds, they did that. Picard, I think, maintained its own look, but I don't know, it kind of, I mean, to a point. I mean, it was probably also JJ's Trek. I mean, as I said in the Triples episode, I think my sweet spot for the way Star Trek should look is the 90s, like the way DS9 and Enterprise and Voyager were shot. That's the look I like for Star Trek. That's also the Star Trek I grew up on. So,
yeah.
Can we not record it to VHS though? Can we do that? Just in case later on we might want to spend some money on it.
Yes, and finally high def and everything, and remaster it. Yeah. I mean, Jack, I'm curious because has Grayson watched any current Trek, or I'm just curious, if he was watching the current Trek, would he be like, no, that's the way it's supposed to look, and look at the 90s stuff and be like the way we look at maybe sometimes the original series? What's his take on the way Trek looks?
Very good question. So ironically, he's not into Star Trek. I think we let him watch the J.J. Abrams one, and he has actually seen Into Darkness. He has no interest in seeing Beyond, and I have invited him to kind of watch the original show, and it'll be on as I'm watching. He'll ask, "What are you watching?" And I said, "Star Trek." And so I think on one level, there is that gap in his understanding, but we do encourage him to watch older movies where the production values aren't necessarily as great or gripping. And he actually appreciates the stories and the storylines, and more so than he does a lot of the current movies. And so we, as I might have mentioned, we watched E.T. He really enjoyed that. We watched Ghostbusters, and I think I said on another podcast is he's at an age now where he can watch Stranger Things, and so we go back and we're starting from Stranger Things season 1, because when it came out he was only 6, and like now it's fine, and as we're watching, I said you have to remember they're trying to capture the feeling of the 80s, and so most of the choices and the decisions of what they do is, as we're watching, I'll say, this is actually an homage to the movie The Thing. This is actually an homage to, Evil Dead. But you should see what it looked like originally, because you will get spoiled from this very nice glossy appearance, and the practical effects really matter. And so I think, to some extent, he does have an appreciation for practical effects. 2 weekends ago, we actually saw The Two Towers in theater, because he hadn't seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies in the theaters, and so it was important. I was like, yeah, I think you need to see what it was like for us to actually be there and be consumed by all of this. And there are so many practical effects that are in there, and so to really just try to show him that you can tell a really good story even if it doesn't look as refined as what you may be used to.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, Jack, it's great that you expose him to all that, and and it seems like he's more receptive to it than in previous. So it's good that he's open to seeing where the origin is for these things that he's consuming now.
Yes, yeah.
Speaking of like practical effects, I don't know if anyone else like rewatched this for this podcast, but I was rewatching it. And I was like, I was saying, I think this movie still like holds up. Like, the effects are like nothing like I was watching. I was like, nothing really like stood out to me. Like, oh, well, that's an effect. Like, that's an effect. That's it's everything in the movie was like really solid. The effects work on this movie is still good. The spaceship battle still good. Everything on this movie still holds up considering when it was made and what they were doing. I think ILM was doing.
Well, ILM did the Genesis wave effect when the lifeless planet is turned into a planet to be able to sustain life. And I remember back in the day when I worked at Barnes & Noble, 18th Street, 18th and 5th, we had a computer science book, and there was a whole chapter of that scene.
Oh, wow.
How it was made in that book. And I was always constantly reading it, getting familiar with it. You know me, I'm a big practical effects guy. That's why I like Westerns so much, right? The effects in this movie, this is one of the first. It's one of the first films to extensively use CGI.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it doesn't. It adds to the film. It doesn't take you out of the film. It still looks pretty good, and it's just there for the graphics when they're looking at their screens on the bridge. Those are computer graphics. We hadn't seen that in the Star Trek movie previously. I don't know if we saw that in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I don't think so. But at no time are you taken out of it. And when I was watching it this morning, I said, "No, this is good. This is the perfect merger of practical and computer effects." And I just wish we had that in movies today. Yeah.
I'm gonna. I know we've been talking like a lot deeper stuff, but I'm gonna switch to like more of the uniforms. I love the uniforms of Star Trek 2.
Oh my God,
Joe, I think those are like my favorite uniforms are the First Contact / DS9 uniforms from the later seasons. My second favorite is the Star Trek 2 onward uniforms through Star Trek 6. But I'm curious, John, I know those are your favorites, or one of your favorites too. I don't know if it's the favorite one for you, but
oh yeah, so it's been a favorite. I mean, first of all, your favorite tends to be when you were young and introduced to it, and when it hits you with the most enjoyment, that tends to be your favorite. It could have been. I dare say that I think if the movie you really enjoyed, the first one you saw was motion picture, that would probably be the uniforms you liked the most.
Objectively wrong, but sure.
Objectively wrong. Those aren't uniforms; those are pajamas.
these uniforms are so different because, well, they're uniform quite literally. They're not the red, gold, blue to denote which sort of
Hmm.
service division you're in. That was an interesting difference. I mean, you saw the engineers were wearing more functional engineering,
Yeah.
not outfits, but actual like they were. This was part of their equipment.
Mhm.
What Scotty's wearing is they plug into the oxygen and all kinds of things. Like it was functional. The rest of the uniforms, they do suffer from the accusation that they are military, but that was something they meant to explore in this movie. That is Carol Marcus's things like Starfleet is the military. I don't think they were trying to make it to like, let's reinvent Star Trek so Starfleet is the military. It's debating the danger of approaching that. And the uniforms really reflected that in an interesting way, that they're very cool. I think they're aesthetically really pleasing, especially for that era of style, the early 80s and everything else. But it finally gave you a sense of like, oh, this is the difference between an admiral without it looking a little bit like a billion different colorful triangles on the hand. That was always, what Next Gen had. I do like the way that they tried to incorporate that into Strange New Worlds. But this was more like, yeah, going in line with what works on a movie screen. Star Trek was there to show you what color TV could do. The uniforms are largely a product and a request to the network to be that. Now you're on the big screen. And they tried the muted colors that were the pastels of the 70s and the motion picture. And yeah, I mean, it looked like they were wearing pajamas in space. This looked like, oh, there's a little bit of a formality to it. Like you want to dress up. You want to feel, you want to feel that thing like, oh, I've gotten into my Starfleet uniform. That's what these uniforms felt. It was so funny to have this go, only a few years later into next gen uniforms, which brought back the colors, the tricolors, just switched up yellow and blue. But actually, red, yellow, and blue, they all got switched. They looked again like they were jumpsuits. And I love how that was Roddenberry reasserting his control. This movie is not as heavy Roddenberry controlled. And you see that. But for some reason, these uniforms just work. They worked in the way that they could also go business casual in Star Trek 4, and Star Trek 3. And I still love whatever that suit was. I don't know, you call it a suit, a sports. I don't know what it was that Admiral Kirk is wearing. It's kind of hilarious where it looks a little bit like a Star Trek uniform, but it's like, hey, I'm also ready for a 70s lounge experience. This is a leisure suit almost. They were really having some fun with these.
It's velour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it worked. Like when you see them 2 movies later in San Francisco, try to imagine a jumpsuit walking through San Francisco in 1986. They would really stand out. But seeing Uhura in her uniform in San Francisco, it sort of worked. It was like, oh, it's a little edgy and different for San Francisco of 1986, but it works. But it also works in Star Trek 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 as like, oh, it's also like a functional starship uniform. It denotes your rank, and it's just aesthetically pleasing. I also read that the reason why in Next Gen, when they're going back to the Enterprise C, why they didn't have the collars of the Wrath of Khan onward uniforms is because it was a unique needle point, a unique physical needle to do that pattern
Really?
that they literally, it does not exist anymore. Like the one person who did it, like they didn't have that, they can't recreate that pattern. And they were, when trying to create that for future Star Trek, they were just like, okay, we're just going to go without the shirt, the undershirt with the cool collar.
Since
And
when are they worried about comfort? They could have just molded it out of plastic and told them,
right.
too bad you're wearing it.
Suck it up.
Also, whose note is it to? You think the uniforms came out and they're like, yeah, this is close, but you know what we really need, guys? We need a fold down napkin so that if someone's bleeding, we can really highlight the blood all over the inside of our white shirt. Like, where did that come from?
That had to be a design choice of like, yep, there's the blood on screen, red.
It works great for it. Yeah.
I imagine those things were very warm on the set. They looked I don't
think.
Hopefully they were made of cotton and not polyester, which was originally polyester back in the 80s, right?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. The uniforms are the thing that I like. This movie, like for me, when I think about this movie, is when they got the uniforms that really, like I said, made like this was their jumping on point to really getting into their stride with the movie making. Keith, I'm curious, what's your, like, we've highlighted a lot of things so far. What's your like big highlight or memorable scene or takeaway from Wrath of Khan?
I'm just kind of amazed how, I mean, it's like a lazy movie in some respects. They're really just doing, I mean, it's pretty clear they're just doing Moby Dick with Star Trek characters, but like it works. I mean, if I guess if you don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting on the overall plot, like it's a good lens to examine aging and not reinventing yourself as time goes on. I mean, they mentioned a few times where, not really having to suffer the consequences to your actions. I think there's some a little bit about like what kind of a leader you are. I mean, Kirk kind of crowdsources, whereas Kahn, he has followers, but he doesn't use them to help him
No.
too much. I mean, they're just there to die for him, basically. I mean, he's pretty much the king, whereas Kirk, like, I mean, yeah, he's brash and he's stubborn, which is something I can definitely identify with. But he will listen and he does learn from his mistakes, like when he doesn't lower the shields fast enough, doesn't raise the shields fast enough, I should say, and then Savick is like, really, when you come into contact with another vessel, you're supposed to raise your shields. And Spock is like, shh, he knows the rules. He knows the rules. And then they kind of get their ass handed to them. And, Kirk turns around and he's like, go right on quoting regulations at me.
Mhm.
So I think it's an interesting examination of some things, but there's also a lot of fun ship battles. So I mean, I was young when I saw it, so I didn't care about the interpersonal relationships except for to see Spock and to see another Vulcan, but I was all about the ship battles. But there is actually stuff to dig into in this movie, I think.
Yeah, I love that rewatching it as I'd forgotten like he's like Spock is like he thinks very linearly, like so he's got to think
Oh yeah, he
in
thinks
three
in two
dimensions.
dimensions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they run silent, and they run deep. Right. There you go. Right. Yeah. No, it works on that level.
It definitely gave me some like Balance of Terror vibes, which is what made
Yes.
that episode so good. Because just like
Think of that.
yeah, you have a strong opponent on the other side, and it's ships in space basically, silent and popping out, and then there's a little bit of action.
Joe, what's your like highlight that we haven't?
She hit on some of them, but obviously the ship battles, that was kind of cool. Again, it was. I'm assuming those were all models, right? And it looked very good. It looked very real. It's on the big screen. There was a lot of ships coming over the camera, kind of, I guess, trying to get a Star Wars vibe there going there. From back in '77, we first see that ship coming over our heads in the theater. But yeah, the battles, the scene with at the beginning in the hallway when Spock gives the book to Kirk. And this is, I don't know if you noticed this, but when they come aboard the Enterprise, Kirk is holding the copy of. Now look at this, an English major, and he can't think of the name of the book. I know it's Dickens, but somebody help me, please. It's what is it? Okay, well, whatever. So Kirk hands the book to Uhura, but with a flourish, kind of. It's like there's these little moments throughout the film that William Shatner, you can see he's having so much fun with this, and he's like, I guess he's been freed because he's off the small screen now, and he's 3 years apart from Star Trek: The Motionless Picture. I'm sorry, Josh. I'm sorry, Josh. I didn't mean that. I know you're not here, but
The Tale of Two Cities, by the way.
thank you. A Tale of Two Cities. Thank you. The big moments, yes, but the small moments, the character moments. Kirk is like, almost freaking out when Savick takes the ship out of dry dock. That's a cool moment. I look for those type of moments in these movies because I know these characters so well, and I want to see them react in these different situations. And they did it. They hit it out of the park with this film. They really did.
Joe, you already alluded to this, and I'm assuming for all of us. I mean, I don't think Spock's death was not a surprise to any of us when we
Not at all.
when we
We knew. I
saw
know
it.
about it.
I mean,
Mhm.
I had seen 4. I had seen 3 or 4 first, so I kind of already knew. But
Well, you guys knew because obviously you've seen it. But I was going in cold, but yet we all knew. Me and my friends all knew that Spock was going to die in this film. And as I said at the beginning, I don't know exactly why. Probably leaked out at the convention, and some of the fan magazines. Starlog, maybe. Was Starlog around back then? Maybe too.
Starlog. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So it might have leaked out there, but it didn't spoil the film. Not in the least.
no, I think it's still a very moving, effective scene for it.
Yeah.
I was just curious. Like, I wonder, as we always like to do a time capsule of the time. I wonder if, what people thought who were surprised by it. If it was like a big deal, if you remember, Joe, like amongst that they killed Spock, or if it's like, or if they already knew, like we do, like if you kill a main character, they're most likely coming back.
It's hard to remember that. How being a Trekkie then and now, I was surrounded by like-minded people in that respect. So I don't know about the quote-unquote normies who may or may not remember the old television show if they were surprised by that. I imagine there were people like, oh my God, they killed off one of the major characters. We all knew he was coming back. I mean, obviously, when they show you his quote-unquote coffin, photon
Torpedo tube.
yeah, on the planet of life. Well, oh, duh. You know what Star Trek's going to be about, right? So yeah.
Well, that was a reshoot too. They put that in at the end. Like they cut the movie, and then I think somewhere during post-production is when they were talking to Leonard, if I'm remembering this correctly. I mean, too bad Josh is not with us anymore, but
Yeah, Josh.
but he could tell me. But I think they were cutting and they realized this, like they can't do this. So that's when they shot the torpedo tube, and I think that's when they shot that scene where he does the mind meld with remember. Yeah, I think that's when they put that in as a backdoor to like, okay, if this doesn't go well, we can bring him back or something like that. So
Katra. That's how Kramer dominated the dojo. What is Katra?
Jack, I don't think we've talked about like what are your particular highlights or takeaways from this movie? I mean, number one on your list is pretty high for like
Sure.
Yeah.
No, and I stand by it.
I have a request for Jack. I have a request.
Sure.
Compare and contrast Death of Spock with Death of Optimus Prime. Go.
Oh, wow. Okay. I will circle back to that.
We know that all things should be viewed through the lens of Transformers. Come on, Jack.
Yeah, of course. I will circle back to that. I want to answer James's question first. Give me some
Pin in it.
So the interesting thing that I really love, and going back to the motion picture, I mean, we've talked about it. I have my problems with it. There was actually a lot of thought that went into the uniforms that is very subtle, that doesn't necessarily get reflected in the intentions of the people who made the costumes. And so there's a lot of subtlety that went into it. I do feel, and I agree, that a lot of that has to do with Gene Roddenberry's influence, and so that's problematic. And bringing Gene Roddenberry into it, his original story for Star Trek II was the Klingons used the Guardian of Forever, and they go back in time to prevent the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That was the original story, and I think the studio is just kind of like, all right, we just can't listen to this guy anymore because we spent $45 million on what? These pastel kind of costumes. No, I think for me the significance mostly is Harvey Bennett essentially created this entire idea of what Star Trek films should be. And they brought him in. He was already working with the studio, and I think he had won an Emmy Award by the time they kind of consulted with him. And he actually took it upon himself to. He knew nothing about Star Trek. He went through the entire
all
catalog.
79 episodes, yes.
Exactly. And he said what they really need is a compelling villain. And so he really just kind of really liked Ricardo Montalban's Kahn. And then Montalban was also doing Fantasy Island at the time, so he was already known to people. I mean, he really thought not only how do you make the story compelling, how do you make the characters compelling, how do you do world building in a world people already know. And so in many ways, I think if but for his insistence and his influence, the Horatio Hornblower, stories greatly inspired him. And so he was able to sit back and say, all right, and like we also said, this whole notion, are we an exploration organization? Are we a military organization, which again is highlighted in the new Star Trek Starfleet Academy, where they actually have a war college. And so these are questions that I think have been asked over since Star Trek aired. And the original show, the original series, he really just front and center just kind of put them out there. And again, since he has wrote the second, the third, and the fourth, it really kind of set the template for what we should expect from a Star Trek movie. You can have your show, and that's fine, which we would later have, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and you can also have the movies, and the movies have a certain expectation that they need to deliver to the audience. And I am grateful that that is kind of the true contribution that The Wrath of Khan broke from the motion picture, broke ostensibly from the original series, and created its own identity in a way that if it wasn't successful, as we said, Wrath of Khan made 8 times the amount of money that they spent, the franchise in and of itself probably would have died off. And so that, I think, is just a testament of good character writing and good story development, the impact that can have, not only in the individual project that you're working on, but the longevity that it can actually have over time. For me, I think is the greatest significance of what, Wrath of Khan does that the motion picture didn't do. And it basically set up the expectations for everything that came after. Keith, back to your question.
Great.
Much more chest hair on display in this movie versus the
yes, exactly. And Buff, he does his push-ups. Answer to your question, I have to say Death of Optimus Prime. Now, and I'll tell you why is A, he doesn't just die. I mean, he goes out like a boss, okay?
That's right.
And just, I mean, so, and let me tell you, that holds up even to this generation. I showed it to Grace, and he was like, wow, how'd you guys ever recover? I was like, I never said we did.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Still talking about it.
He's still talking about it. And then, he turns black, okay? It's not just that,
and then the head rolls over.
He ceases to function, and holding on to the matrix. but and then
out of his hands.
And then exactly. And then we didn't expect him to come back until, because that was in our mind. That was it. There was no indication that there was ever going to be, like, you were saying, Joe, if you call the, if you call the next movie Search for Spock and Nimoy's directing it, we're betting man. I'm going to say he comes back. But, that's it. Optimus was done. Rodimus was the man. Okay.
You mentioned Hart Bennett, right?
Yes.
He may have saved the franchise. Well,
absolutely.
About a decade earlier, or half a decade earlier, 6 or 7 years. No, it was 73. Yeah, so he saved ABC because ABC was floundering. Happy Days had just come on the air, but they were still floundering. And he came up with a show called The $6 Million Man. And overnight, that was the top show in America for like 2 or 3 years. And people credit that with saving ABC. So. The man had a knack for knowing what people wanted, and giving it to them.
That was the thing. I saw this after Transformers because I dragged my mom to Transformers in the theater. So I saw Optimus Prime die first, and then I saw this movie, and I was like, oh, well, whatever. Like, I was 6 when I saw my hero die, so this is nothing. I can deal with this.
You can handle that. Yes. Wow.
Not to turn this into a Transformers episode,
I'm hijacking it, James.
Exactly.
Nothing you can do about it.
This happens all the time.
Can't say you didn't expect this.
Yep. You get what you get. I'm like Kirk. I'm very stubborn. Can't be changed.
You opened with, this is, Keith's first appearance on a Star Trek episode.
And last, probably.
Just somehow it was going to stay on Star Trek.
This movie definitely had some moments, though. I mean, in the first one, there were no moments where it touched me. In this one, when Spock puts, the Energizer back on, or whatever the heck that thing's called, and then, Sulu's like, oh, we've got all the power, and Kirk is like, all right, go, let's go. And then, he calls down to Scotty, and he's like, oh, great job. And Scotty's like, I think you better come down here. I was like, that hit pretty hard in this movie.
Then he looks to the,
Yeah, and it's empty.
But as it's filmed, I mean, and this is the foreshadowing. I mean, and again, as I said, we came in late to the movie, and there's the Kobayashi Maru, and then Kirk actually says, Mr. Spock, I thought you were dead. There's hint number 1. Number 2, Peter Preston. Okay, again,
Scotty's nephew, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. You only know that from the longer extended version, okay? Because exactly.
Too,
But again, so there are stakes in this movie, and so there was the mock death, which I heard they filmed later because it had already leaked that Spock was going to die, and so they kind of filmed that to kind of throw people off. It's like, oh, okay, that's what they must have meant. And then but then there's the other death that happens, Peter Preston. And so then you get to, and then in your mind, you're like, well, they absolutely wouldn't do this again, and sure enough, it's going back to and make a parallel to a more recent movie that had a very similar kind of balance that it had to undertake. And, Wakanda Forever, again, Ryan Coogler had a very similar problem. Your main character had died in real life. And so if that's in fact the case, how do you create stakes for the movie? And so they actually kill the character off in the beginning of the movie. Spoiler for anyone who has not seen Wakanda Forever. I don't know why you wouldn't have seen it by now. And then moving forward, Queen Ramonda also dies in the movie. And so they have to provide you with this notion that, well, we are really trying to tell a very serious story here, and unfortunately, what that means is some people have to die, and that is when you know the severity and the choice that the main character faces in what it is that they have to do. The thing here is, and this is, I think, the very unique thing in the way that Harvey Bennett in Star Trek II is done. Kirk had no decision making in the sacrifice. That was something that Spock did solely on his own, and again, made entirely more realistic with, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I mean, so it was all right there if you actually broke it down into what was said, what was shown. Something had to happen, which then, again, to bring it all the way back to Into Darkness, that movie is just a complete bastardization of this movie, because anyone who is just watching that Star Trek, who has no understanding that it was a television show or even a film series ahead of time, Kahn means nothing to anybody. And so that reveal means absolutely nothing. The second aspect of it all is, there was a sacrifice. They did the twist where it was Kirk that sacrificed himself instead of Spock. But then they also had their, get out of jail free card built into the storyline that they already provided. So you didn't even have to wait for another movie. I mean, I raise that insofar as, we talk about practical versus, CGI and visual effects. In this particular situation, we actually have two touchstones which we can actually look at considerably the same story and how they handled it years apart. And J.J. Abrams just, totally, that movie is so hollow. Even for people who are familiar with Star Trek, whereas you see the Wrath of Khan, and that movie is so deep.
But there's so many more lens flares.
There is
Lens
that.
flares per minute is way higher, Jack.
Exactly.
And that movie also plays their Deus Machina card, where the alternate universe Spock tells them who Khan is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is a bad dude.
I don't think we want to get started on comparing those movies.
No.
I think it's important only because in many ways it just demonstrates the better writing and thematic approach that Harvey Bennett put into The Wrath of Khan than J.J. Abrams on his best day could ever do with Into Darkness.
Don't hold back.
Don't hold back, Bones. How do you really feel?
I also like McCoy in this a lot, rewatching it.
Yeah.
Like the lines to Spock is like, "My God, man, we're talking about
Universal Armageddon.
Universal Armageddon."
Universal Armageddon. He's the one that brings everybody back to the sensibility of what does this really mean? You not get it. It's like, well, what was his line? He's like, well, God created the world in 7 days, but look out, here's Genesis.
We can do it in 7 minutes.
You can destroy and create at the same time.
His indignation is literally the indignation we need today about what we're doing with technology, how things are playing out. It's that sort of, my God, man, mentality where it's like, let's just think about this. And maybe, by the way, scattering my atoms around there's a debate there. Are you killing me? Are you reassembling me? What's the deal?
Actually, scientifically, you're doing both.
Doing both. It's just it's both fun. Again, I've said it on the podcast many times. I took his cantankerousness as part of my youthful personality. That worked great, right? That made me so popular.
But were you wrong is the question.
No, I was not wrong. And I get to hold on to that.
As Kevin famously said, my pessimism is a form of clairvoyance, and he was not wrong.
Nope. It's great how he gets to sort of I don't know if there's the Shakespearean character comparison, but he's a unique role in this and almost all the movies, and certainly the original series. But it was not just a counterbalance to Spock's cold logic; it was the counterbalance to Kirk and the Federation's just sort of cowboy, just go off there and do it. And he'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I feel like and he's the one who calls Kirk out in this movie. He's like, "Damn it, Jim! Why do we treat your birthday like a goddamn funeral?" You know, he's the one to say that because he's calling him out like, "I see what's in front of me. Why are we doing this? Like, I am tired of this, and stop whining." And it's sort of like begins to snap Kirk out of it, like, "Oh, I'm sorry about that. Like, I didn't know I was like, such a buzzkill here." And that's what McCoy did. He brings with his Southern charm and his cantankerousness, he brings reality back in.
Yeah.
And of course, DeForest Kelly was genuinely kind.
Well,
Like
he's the heart. I mean, he's supposed to be the heart of that trio.
he really is. And in this, being able to bridge that gap between Spock, Kirk, talking about death in a different way. He's in his own way more lighthearted about it, just sort of like, again, like, why do we treat your Earth like a funeral? He has a way of doing that, which I think is your classic doctor counselor role. Before they split that off between having a genuine counselor on board.
Talk truth and bring Romulan ale. Yeah, it's a pretty good combination for getting secrets out of people, right?
Sorry,
and
Brandy.
I can talk about that. So there I am as a kid, and I convinced my parents, and I used blue food coloring. I made Romulan ale, and I walked around for a week drinking my Romulan ale.
I drink the blue Gatorade. Gatorade Zero, the blue Gatorade Zero looks just like Romulan ale.
There you go. Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite is drilling holes in his head is not the answer, man.
Yeah,
Like out of all the things, was it banned just because they didn't want to trade with the Romulans, or is it because it would get you really messed up?
I always assumed the second, but
Me too.
Because they did the same thing with Star Trek 6, right? That's what they were drinking at the dinner
table.
Was the Romulan ale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's when Kirk makes the orders like, no more Romulan ale to be served.
I'm gonna go look for a pot of coffee, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna look for a pot of black coffee.
Black coffee.
But just gift to Kirk is a pair of reading glasses, and that is both a very kind
it hurts,
gift
doesn't it?
and a shady like insult. Just like, it's so perfect for McCoy.
Yep,
you have really done that. I really do like that, that way, and how they kept this go. Like Star Trek, I see those glasses going on, Jack.
I waited to my 50th.
I like how they kept so much of what started in this movie through 3 and 4. Like the glasses have a story beat in Star Trek 4.
Do you think him and Spock planned their gifts? Because I mean, Spock gives him a book, and do you think McCoy was like, I'm going to give him the reading glasses. This is going to be, we're both going to like give him a little nudge.
I mean, maybe McCoy was like going to make it a joke, and then Kirk was so depressed when he got there. He's like, this is not going to, this is supposed to be a gag, and now this guy's depressed. So
yeah, maybe.
And the joke of all it is that now we are we 43 years past the movie now?
44.
Yeah.
44 this June.
82, so 40. Yeah, I mean, oh my God. There William Shatner is functionally immortal. Like, he looks like no 90-year-old I've ever met. 90s, 95, something 90. Yeah, like, he 95. Doesn't look like anyone in their 90s. I don't know. Maybe he has one of those life transfer devices. I don't know.
He's just Canadian. That's all.
He's Canadian. Well, yeah. Exactly. But apparently he wasn't nice when he was younger, so he defied that stereotype. But it's hilarious because you see it's like, oh, you had nothing to worry about. You had another good 50 years of being cool and living your life. But it's very funny to see that, to think that like, there he is, woe is me. And here we are in 2026 discussing his Super Bowl commercial. Hey, Walter Koenig has held up pretty well. And of course, George Takei. But I don't think they're doing too many events together. He's lasted and shown us, I guess, how to age with some, I don't know if grace is the word.
Tenacity.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you, Joe. That's brilliant. But it was also just a fun movie. I mean, we got to jump in on like what the coolness factor is of this movie. That it brought in an element to Star Trek that I feel, especially your young viewer, who I could go on a tangent on how many young viewers clearly did not get what Trek was about. Certain people commenting on Twitter these days, obviously. But part of the appeal to Star Trek, even if you weren't knee deep in the philosophy of it, was sort of the cool sci-fi space battle aspect, which the original series got to do with its effects that they could do on TV in the 60s. And the effects really showed some cool stuff in the motion picture. but it was under a very different context with V'ger. This movie got to show you, oh man, this is what, like, it is when they're facing a genuine threat in ship to ship combat. And they took it, they made it like a submarine movie. You said, Joe, it's exactly that. Put them in a nebula, you can almost forget that it's three-dimensional. Obviously that'll be your decline when you do. It was very cool, and then just as emotionally, like, devastating, that well before Spock dies, the Enterprise is crippled. To see the Enterprise wounded so badly, it's very different. You didn't see anything like that in the motion picture. It's like, oh yeah, V'ger overwhelms, but V'ger's a god, by comparison. It wasn't a surprise to see their defense screens overwhelmed. Sure, to see the Enterprise completely crippled, to see death on board the Enterprise, Scotty crying over it, and knowing he has to get the ship able to at least limp back into the fight. That's our emotional ride, and then to get the completion of that arc where the Enterprise comes up behind the Reliant,
I love that.
fires those torpedoes. I loved that. Here's my, like, little kid misinterpretation moment that, how a lot of us, you hear a song a certain way and you get the words wrong. Well, that happened to me at a moment in this movie. So I'm watching that scene and you see Kahn freaking out, like, as he's getting hit, and he says the line, he said, "Fire aft torpedoes." He does it very quickly and sort of mangles it. And for years of my life, I thought he was saying "after Beatles." After Beatles? What the fuck do Beatles have to do with this? I'm sure I was cursing as a kid.
They task him, and he shall have them.
And for years, I did not know what after Beatles were.
Well, Kahn's from the 1990s, right?
Yeah.
So they probably met Paul McCartney at some point.
He wasn't wearing clothing nearly baggy enough to be from the 1990s.
No.
And we have to talk about that chest piece.
No, that was all him, man.
All natural, baby.
All Ricardo Montalban.
That was all Montalban, baby.
All him.
Exactly. That was just pure Corinthian leather. Okay, yeah.
He had to show it off. He had to show it off there. There he was, and every one of his crew members looked like an 80s model.
Well, they were supposed to be genetically engineered people, right? So,
yeah. So clearly that makes sense. It was. He takes over the 1990s with 1980s models. Funny, I think it is kind of poignant to visit the story of David Marcus in the movie, who
Merritt Buttrick.
Yes, who sadly dies only a few years later
after the TNG episode, right?
After the TNG episode, of AIDS, and is really a really important story for that era. That is very easy to forget, that what the world was going through, what the gay community was going through with the HIV a crisis and plague. We lost another actor too young, and he had a lot going for him. He managed to pull off. He stood up to Captain Kirk. I mean, the way he calls his father out in this movie is a way that makes you, as a viewer, made me as a kid feel uncomfortable. I'm like, how dare you talk to Captain Kirk that way? And you realize, especially as you get older and watch this movie again, what validity that had. I mean, he really wanted to know. His mother thought she was protecting him, but he didn't know he didn't get to have a relationship with his father that he knew was out there, gallivanting around the galaxy, being this great captain. And what a complex element to bring in. And yes, it is shoehorned in. It's like, here's a son you didn't know you had, but a really interesting relationship way. And there you go. Again, aging. All of a sudden you find out you have a son who's an adult now. And he sort of ends up very proud of him, because he didn't follow in the Starfleet mold. He followed in the scientist mold in another aspect of the Federation, and then is taken from him a movie later, giving Kirk another real emotional arc. Something that really gives so much more, so that when I think we're growing up watching these movies as our first exposure to Star Trek, it's really cool to see like this dimension to Captain Kirk beyond just being the cool captain of the ship. Like he experiences loss, he experiences joy, he experiences this whole range of things that we get to go on the ride for. Talk about it even in the less good Star Trek V, which, Joe, to your point, Star Trek V, has Harvey Bennett appearing as an admiral in it.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And I do think that for all the issues we've all discussed many times in Mint Condition of Star Trek V, I think it's a better movie than any of the J.J. Abrams movie in terms of how I enjoy it personally.
Wow.
Just like,
hot take.
it is like the J.J. Abrams movie don't work. They have moments where they do, but it's there's just something so missing from those movies.
This movie is pretty amazing, though. I mean, when you consider, I mean, Josh is, I'm going to bash motion picture, and Josh isn't here, I guess, but
Sorry,
easy
Josh.
target. But I mean, considering the first movie where it didn't work for me on either level. It wasn't fun to watch. There wasn't really any action, and it didn't feel deep in any way. It didn't really speak to me. But this one, like, if you're a kid and you just want to tune in for action, this has that. Like, you don't understand the nuances of like him and Kahn, but like Kahn choose screen time, and you're there for the original crew anyway, and the interplay between the two of them is fun. They introduce the son and Carol Marcus. There's all that, but like this movie does an unlikely job of balancing like returning to the roots of the original show, where there's the interaction of your favorite trio, with Spock being like the brains, kind of like the mental aspect, McCoy being the heart, and then Kirk being like, move fast, break things, action part of that trio. And then also having the ship as a character, where like it's under duress, it's being hurt, but it's the home for everybody, and that's part of the story. But then also you have where Hart Bennett does like such an amazing job of having a culture shift, where now like we're going to have continuity, like we're going to have things are going to follow. In original series, like you wipe Uhura's mind, and the next episode she's back to normal, like that. But that wasn't a thing back then, so I mean that's fine. But the first movie, there were no consequences. Also, like the guy who went away with with V'ger, and the girl who went away, they weren't even characters you cared about from in the first place. So
Decker and
this
Ilea.
one, yeah, Decker and Ilea. I mean, this one has continuity. It's going to set up continuity later. Obviously, it's tied with 3, but like things that happen in the earlier movies are going to continue to affect the later movies. And like if bad things happen, you're going to have to deal with those consequences going forward. It's not just going to be a reset every time. So pretty amazing. I mean, when you think about all the things this movie was able to accomplish with, I didn't even realize such a small budget.
Yeah,
That's a good budget.
that's very well said, Keith. That was.
Yeah, I had my moments.
I
I'm
think
still
that-
probably not getting invited back, but whatever, that's fine.
No, that's not true. That's true. I think
Love
that's-
you, dear readers. See you never again.
And how this relates to
I
Galvatron.
gotta dance, sing for my supper right there.
Exactly.
Well, we're gonna bring this the ship into the space dock, but before we do, John and Keith, like, you've given some like really thoughtful some final thoughts for us. So Joe and Jack, I'm curious, any final thoughts for us that you would like to share, or things that you've thought about as we've been?
Yeah, so I mean, I just want to touch on something that Josh said with respect to the budget. I mean, for those who don't know, we talked about the motion picture. That had a $45 million budget.
Wow.
And so they slashed the movie, and so apparently when they approached Hervé Bennett to actually write the movie, and I think it was Nicholas Meyer who directed it.
Mm-hmm.
And fine, they had the first one so they could reuse sets, but they really were able to do a lot with a little, and I think that is something that is completely lost, and it's been said here before, is you can tell a really good story and you don't need a lot of money. And I think kind of touching on this whole scarcity society discussion we've somehow come into the idea that the more you can do is going to make it more believable to the audience, and what's believable to the audience is just a good story and good characters, and I think as we enter the age of large language models and AI and so many things having no weight, it's important for people to really recognize that it's not about money. Grace and I are watching Wonder Man, and no spoilers, but that is a very character-driven story, and there's not a lot of money that's being spent, but you care about what happens to them. I honestly feel the entertainment industry has completely lost sight of that. And so I think as the Star Trek movie that set the template for the ones that followed, but also in its own right, it can teach us a lot about what it is that we can actually buy into as something that would have meaning to us in our own lives, and the themes that it shares. I think everyone should watch this. If you want to be a filmmaker, you should watch this and say, all right, can you do what they did with $12 million adjusted for inflation? Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's a story. It's always just to have the story mapped out first before you worry about whether or not you're gonna do special effects and stuff. If it's not a good story, you're not gonna have a good movie, probably, most likely. So, Joe, as we started with you, we're gonna give the final thoughts to you. Any final thoughts we haven't covered? Or
Well, Jack just covered what I was going to say, but he did. I'm glad he did it because he said it much better than I could have about character-driven stories. But as I was researching today, I found that the Rotten Tomato score for this movie, 90 for the audience, but what really stood out was it had an 87 critics score.
Wow.
That is high for a Star Trek film. And I do remember Siskel and Ebert liking this film. That I do remember. So, science fiction, even back in the early 80s, was just poo-pah'd away by these critics. John Rich, who famously once said, I never liked Star Trek. That's how he started his review on CBS. But I went to see Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan. And, okay, why should I believe anything you're going to say now? You don't get it, you don't like it. So, but there were critics that liked this film. And if Siskel and Ebert liked this film, then you got to Harv and Nicholas Meyer and the crew and the cast did their job. So I'll leave it with that.
Excellent. Well, thank you to the entire crew for being here and talking about Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Now, listening audience, you can listen to, if you haven't already, 1, 2, 3, and 4 all in a row for the podcast if you want to go back in time. Which should be interesting to actually do that since we've recorded them all out of order and all through different time periods of this podcast. So that should be an interesting trip. But of course, I could have not done this episode without the rest of the crew. So thank you very much, Joe.
Oh, thank you, James. As I said when we did the Planet of the Apes episode, I got to rewatch a great film, and I did that this morning. I'm rewatching this, so thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Jack.
My pleasure.
Thank you, John.
I feel young.
There you go.
And Keith, thank you for joining us for your first Star Trek episode.
Kahn!
Somebody's got
to do it.
Someone's gotta do
Yeah. You weren't poached.
And Josh had to leave early, but Josh, thank you very much for your input at the beginning of the episode. Listening audience, if you have not seen this movie, which I can't imagine if you're actually listening to this podcast, you haven't, you should go. It's available anywhere. You can probably get movies of any type. You can watch Wrath of Khan. But if you have your thoughts about it, we'd love to hear from you. So however you're listening to this podcast, you can usually leave a comment somehow. So we'd love to hear from you about it. If you're interested in joining our Discord, it's invite only, but you can reach out to me at secretoriginsmc@gmail.com. We thank you for listening and live long and prosper.